Łomeckoju zasłał za górami, pożegnał się góral, góral się pożegnał z Turnickami. Pożegnał się góral, góral się pożegnał z Turnickami.
Hello and welcome to a show by the Living Memory Association. This recording is from the 15th of October 1999. Within this show we'll be listening to the incredible tale of Henryk Wardzinski and his escape from Nazi-occupied Poland. This story is full of danger, suspense, friendship, camaraderie and above all, hope.
The rain kept falling and falling, you see. And it started, that we were sitting in the Highland family house, and we were already, I think, 2 or 3 days there. Every time after the evening meal, there was a sort of chat, sort of bemoaning the fate that befell Poland. But this night, the man wasn't in the mood to talk, and it was fidgety, and my brother sensed this, and says, anything wrong? And the old man says, well, I don't know if this will have, of any interest to you or not. You see, we came to stay with him with our sort of cover stories. My brother and I were looking for our mother, who was supposedly have been on holiday somewhere there, hasn't returned. Adam was looking for a sister, and Janusz for a fiancé or something like that. Cover story, which we told the man, But the man wasn't stupid, He he had his own ideas, but he was, sort of going about this, sort of circumspect, sort of. And he says, I don't know if that'll be of any interest to you or not. I said, what is it? What is it? We asked. And he said, well, it's like this, the Germans killed a bullock in the village. And at night, somebody stole the meat. The locals, Highland rivers, And the Germans are making door-to-door searches, you see. They haven't come to this end of the village yet, but they might be. They'll likely come this way if they're still looking, if they haven't found the meat yet. So it was several times in our escape where occasionally this sort of, that we all got up without saying a word and shook hands with the man. No more was said, There was no telling we're escaping or whatever. My brother did not want him to get involved too much, because if the Germans got him or something like that, the more he knew, the more he might suffer for it, you see. So anyway, but there was this, shake of hands. It was a simple, his wife and him, simple country folk, but something. Polish peasants have a sort of wisdom of their own that education doesn't give, that life experience probably. So soon after that, our guide, when we arrived in the village, we were giving an address in the village, and these people recommended this man who can help us over the border. And he was away scouting the country to see if he can change our money in a foreign currency, because the money we had was pre-war Polish money or German occupation money, which were no use outside of Poland. So he was trying to change them either into Czech money or Hungarian or whatever, any kind of money except Polish. When he arrived, he was soaking wet, because all evening the rain was falling, cats and dogs, steady, rain. And we told him the man's story. And he says, we are leaving immediately. He said, I didn't get much money at all, but a little. And, well, he hardly took much time for eating something or drying himself. And we left the house, the old couple shook their hand again. That's good luck, and so on. And we went into the dark of the night. In no time we got soaked as well. And we're trudging up the mountain. At one point, the guide stopped and he said, we're getting quite near the border now. No talking now. And from that point on, everybody for himself. He says, the other side of the mountain is Slovakia. So we started the last lap. And then my brother checked, if everybody was there. Janusz was there. He was supposed to be, we were going, in a Indian stuff. The line. Janusz was there. So we stopped and looked around. The next thing we heard a whistle. And the guide says, gosh, it could be the German border guards signaling to each other. And at that time, Janusz appeared, huffing and puffing. My brother gave him some filthy swear, and we went. When we came right to the top in the darkness, I saw the border posts. On the east side with the Polish eagle, on the other side with the Czechoslovakian rampart line, something like Scotland's. And it was just a quick look back. And I finished the essay, and the rain, the country was in total darkness, and the rain kept falling and falling. And that was the end of the essay, But I never mentioned, with Poland that we were escaping for France or anything like that, It was in a way to be, sort of action.
Yeah. What did you feel like when you went over the border there?
I looked back, and I remember it crossed my mind, when will I be back? But it was just a quick sort of, because for one thing, once going up was bad enough, but going on the other side, it was difficult to keep your feet. And most times we were coming down on our backsides, because it was November and there was sleet, and then the surface was slithery, and it was easy to miss your footing, come down.
Did you feel relief in a way? I mean, were you relieved?
Well, you felt the tenseness of it, you see. Tenseness, and like my brother says, gave Janusz a telling off. He should have never whistled, because it wasn't the guards. But if the guards heard that whistle, they would know there's somebody on the border. And they wouldn't ask for your name and address. They would just shoot if you didn't stop, at their command, So there was that tenseness, and you were preoccupied keeping the line, keeping going, not staying behind, not getting lost. And, this was the same, in the Navy, during actions, so on. You see, in the Navy, my action stations were in the ammunition parks, which were the bowels of the ship below the water level. And when you went down there, through a sort of round opening, the guys the gunners, they had to close it and secure it. If that ship was hit, they wouldn't be allowed to open. And there was two of us working there. And I wasn't stupid enough not to realize that we were working in a coffin, really. But it didn't bother us. Not that we were heroes or anything like that, but you had a job to do. The guys above were waiting for the shells, because there was a mechanical lift. There were 4 or 6 shells to each. Actually, at one stage, somebody opened, the thing, they looked down, and He said, "You all right, lads?" I said, "Yes, why?" "We thought you were shouting." "We weren't shouting, we were singing, actually."
I think you said before, you know, at the time you're going through all these experiences, and some of them are not pleasant experiences, but at the time you are kind of numb. It's not till after.
Yes, yes. Like, that, I mentioned, seeing that, dead woman, with a child. By this time, you're already, we've seen already a dead body, one or two. Oh, one or two, actually. The first one we saw was one single body lying in a ditch at the side of the road, and nobody interested. And that hit us at the time. How is it nobody cared? Nobody saw what happened to him. Why is nobody burying him, But this was the syndrome, the Germans learned. This was part of the blitzkrieg, hitting people so hard that they don't think normally. Then, before we came to Warsaw, it must have been a Sunday, and I think that's the one, I remember I told you that Marisha got the lice in her ear.
That's right, and there was a church.
That's right.
And
it was soldiers, dead soldiers, but they were piled up, like timber for firewood. A pile of them, human bodies. And it was shocking, but you were already numbed to a certain extent, you see. And you see, I think that's like, nature has this sort of escape valves, the safety valves. But you don't forget. And certain things come back. And, that later on, when we got to Warsaw and stayed at the school, and there was a bombardment and the woman was killed, we were quite glad to help, and we were quite capable, no one was showing any sort of squeamishness or shirking, But that little picture, I don't think I forget, it comes back, because, there were unresolved problems. For instance, to my mind, it kept coming back. Has the child found a way back to her family? Had the woman had any papers on her to tell who the child was, where she came from? And, when I see little children playing, 2-3-year-old, you see that little girl.
You see another little girl in another place.
Yeah, another situation. But, there was a blessing if you had, like in the Navy, you had a post, you had to do it, other people depended on it. You weren't worrying that you were in a coffin or not coffin.
No, exactly. And I suppose, as you said, that's part of the human spirit. I mean, after all, you could have sat down there on the border between Poland and Slovakia and said, "I'm too scared to go on." You don't do that. You get on.
One thing was kept moving us. If we were caught by the Germans, we probably would have finished up in the concentration camp. That was quite
an incentive to keep going.
You see.
Yes.
The Slovaks, you see, the Germany dismantled Czechoslovakia. They took the Sudetenland, the border areas of Czechoslovakia, incorporated into Germany. And then the remainder of the Czech country, Bohemia and Moravia, they occupied. But Slovakia, they gave them independence. But it was like the Norwegian puppet, yes.
But But you were safer going through Slovakia. Though.
Yeah, at that time the Slovaks would probably favor us and give us, let us off rather than give us to the Germans. That was in our minds. If it had worked that way or not, hard to tell.
How many of there were you again crossing the border?
By this time, four. Well, Franek started with 3 pals. And then I, when he came home to say goodbye, I said, I'm going. So there was 5 of us met in Warsaw. But one of Franek's pals went to Warsaw. He had some family there and so on. And he changed his mind. He says, I'm not going. I'm staying with their relatives or whatever, whoever they were. My brother went to see, my brother and I went to see our cousin. That's a cousin, Vikcha's and Kasia's brother in Heumno, where Zygmunt was brought up. He finished university in economics, I think, and before the war he got a job in import-export, especially to do with grain. And I don't know, we probably got a government job. And my brother, there was not much love waste, between him and our family. He was rather something like Kaya in America's, rather snobbish, and sort of keeping to himself, But nevertheless, my brother felt his duty to tell him that that was our plans. And if he would like to join us, and he declined, but he was killed in Warsaw Uprising, 1944. He was a reserve officer, and he joined the underground army. And, in that uprising of Warsaw, there was 250,000 people killed. And when I went over to Warsaw, that day only, I arrived on Sunday and I left on Monday, and I could not get it out of my mind, that practically every stone probably was, bathed in blood, And youngsters, girls, members of the underground, and ordinary civilians.
If you had stayed in Poland and not left Poland, what do you think would have happened to you?
Well, I'd probably been like my pals here, Marian and Kazik Boroni here. I would have been called up to the German army, like my eldest brother. But Franek, no. The Franek was on the Germans' list to be arrested.
Now why?
Well, because he was a student,
Because
he was a
older.
lawyer,
He was older,
and
yeah.
he was involved in politics, he was a young university student,
Right.
Sort of bullshit,
And you think he would have been shot?
Well, yes. Actually, when he came from, he was in Warsaw, in the defense of Warsaw.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned to you, when we were in that part of Warsaw, we went to report
And he'd
for
been there and you never knew.
and we never knew.
Yeah.
And then when Warsaw surrendered, they let ordinary soldiers go home, but officers, and in this case, Franek was a cadet officer,
Right.
and they were, by the conditions of the surrender, they were taken prisoner of war, and they were being transported west towards the German border, and he didn't wait till they got that far, and he escaped and got to Poznan, near Poznan, because the route they were taking was through Poznan. And he escaped there, and he had a home in Poznan, his clothing and friends, and his lodgings. And he looked around and wondered, if there'd be possibility of getting a job or something. But he saw that in Poznan too, the young men like him were being rounded up by the Germans. And then on top of that, he heard on the radio that the Polish army was being reformed in France. So he saw what to do then. And with 3 friends, they decided to try to escape. And he came home to say goodbye. And I think I mentioned to you in Poznan that his German pal, Dick von Plain, actually his brother was inherited family estates, but he was a Nazi. he was a Nazi, but Dick was, he married actually a Polish girl in Poznan, and when the war broke out, he was escaping from the Germans. But then, of course, when they were overrun by the front, you know, you had to go back to Poznan. Of course, first thing you had to go and register who you are and get papers, you know. And they were asking him, what are you doing, you know, because, you know, away from Poznan, you know. So, well, no, you cannot say you were escaping from the Germans. You know. They gave him his story. He said, you were there to witness Poles, you know, running away. And later on, he was called up to the German army, you know, on Eastern Front. He lost all his teeth, you know, shrapnel or something like that. He was lucky. He didn't serve in Polish army because he was, I think, category E, which meant, you know, probably had flat feet or something, unfit, you know, for normal military service.
You are currently listening to a show by the Living Memory Association. You can find our shop at Ocean Terminal by Debenhams.
So there was 5 of you went over the border that night?
4 of us.
Four of
Because
us.
Henryk started with 3 pals, but the one...
Dropped out.
Yes.
Yes.
So 2 pals. Adam, who was a lawyer, Adam was already a judge.
Right.
He finished his study, he was already a judge.
Right.
Janusz was a doctor of philosophy, writing books, especially he was interested in Napoleonic. His ancestors actually were in his Polish army in Italy fighting for Napoleon. And Napoleon used them, you know,
And yourself? That was the only 4, that was the 4 of you then?
4 of us.
Yes.
4 of us.
And how old were you all? How old were you?
I was 18. Henryk would be now. Henryk was 24. Well, you see, losing life at that. But you see, even sadder story was with Eric's class. They matriculated just one in 1938. And they all decided, you know, when you finish matriculated, you could decide that you could go and do your national service or to university. You would get exemption if you wanted to go to university, which Henryk did that, you know. He went university first and then did military service afterwards. But most guys, you know, usually went straight from school. And Eric's class, most of them went actually to do military service. Yeah. And after the recruit training, Henryk was to pass his exams for the Air Force School. So he left his pals behind. And his pals were left, you know, in a city not far from our town, where it was a big garrison, you know, I don't know, 2 or 3 infantry regiments. And most of his pals were actually in infantry regiments. And when the war broke out, they were sent on the eastern, on the frontier with East Prussia. And Henryk says that it was just what you could count about on only one hand survivors. The whole sort of generation, you could say, you know, they were all wiped out, you know. And this story always, I keep thinking about Dr. Zhivago. Do you remember that scene, you know, the commander of that cadet school?
Yes. Taking
the young boys to fight?
Yes.
And that always, when I think about Eric's pals, I think about that old man, because the commander of that cadet school was an old man leading. He was right ahead of them, in front of them, and these young boys going for their death, you know.
And it,
Yeah.
you know, and it's the wrong time to be that age.
Yeah. Why we made there, just to make it clear
Oh,
right away.
Otherwise, there'd be no explanation.
Yeah,
really.
but you see, what was important in that essay, about the rain, the rain. Telling the story, it wasn't the purpose of the essay. And of course, what can you write, about the rain? It was raining and raining.
No, but it's some night, some rainy night that
But-
means something to
But
you.
with me, sometimes, it catches my imagination, and I can write, and that was same at school, If I was I always said if I was in the mood, probably, well, you could call it maybe I was in the mood. But on the other hand, if I got the right subject,
Yes.
the right sort of, angle, I was quite good. But
Quite very descriptive. I know that.
Yeah.
You're very descriptive.
was the surrender of Warsaw. Well, I repeat it short. I could get two things together, really. We were involved in a civil defense, when we left the first place after, with the eggs. I think that you haven't got it in the papers yet.
We've got the bit.
Where we went with the eggs to get the eggs boiled, is that right?
No, that was on the way back. Was that on the way back from Warsaw? You went to get the eggs boiled.
No, these eggs we got boiled when we were bombed out from the school. And we were told, this guy who was in charge, probably a teacher,
Yes, that you should. There was no room for any more
Yeah,
body.
he
There was
said-
no ammunition.
Well, we went to report for the service, and they turned us down.
Yes.
And then after that, we were bombed out in the school. We were as refugees.
Yes.
And the chap who was in charge of the place, he says, Warsaw decided to defend itself, and the refugees are just sort of
In the way.
in a way. So he gave us some eggs for our journey on push bikes. We were afraid we'll smash the eggs, you see. So somebody had an idea, to ask someone to boil them hard. We didn't want to eat them right away, but we wanted to keep them as sort of iron rations. And two of the cousin girls went to this house, and the ladies were cooking, and while they were there talking to these ladies, they turned out that the son of one of the ladies was actually, his regiment was on maneuvers and billeted with my aunties, with the girls' parents.
Right.
Yeah, but it was really. And the rest of us who were sitting outside, and of course September, we thought, the rain will come and the German tanks will sink in the mud, Instead, it was such a beautiful, dry, Indian summer. We're sitting in the sun, and we saw people like us going north, towards the German lines, and we realized they must have been like us who were told, to scram, But then we saw some people coming back. So we stopped one of the groups, saying, where are you coming from? He says, well, we're trying to get through the lines. We're told, to get out of Warsaw. But then one of our pals was shot, And the women who were doing the eggs for us heard that. They said, oh, you're not going there. You're not going there. Instead, they sent us to a block of flats. Obviously, they must have known that the woman, they got organized into a sort of civil defense. And the commandant was a woman, very energetic. Well, she gave Filek and me an order to start digging a well. There was a horseshoe-shaped block of flats. One arm was sort of opening a gate for cars, for lorries or whatever coming in onto the main street. And as Filek was in a hole digging and I was above, resting, as I glanced towards the gate, towards the opening, I saw a giraffe pass, and then one or two other animals. I said, Filek, I said, do you see what I see? I jumped up and we were going to run to the gate to see what's happening there. The Germans opened artillery opened fire. So we just dashed into the cellars when the shooting finished, somebody came, and says, a wounded zebra was running about in our compound. There was little gardens, probably, for nursery sort of kids, And somebody reported to our commandant, and she says, "Oh, that's our dinner arrived." She said,
Delicious.
Somebody happened to be a butcher, so it was easy. And soon after that, the other incident is we were sent. One of our jobs was to collect food from warehouses, not only for us, but for a lot of refugees who were billeted in unfinished flats. They had a roof over their heads, but they had no cooking facilities. There was not the one finished yet. And we were bringing the food, cooking for them, and they were coming collecting. They were not far from us. So Felix and I think there was somebody else, there was I think 3 of us, went to the warehouse. On the way, we passed quiet suburban streets, when the fire, when there was no bombing or artillery, it was so idyllic, except we came across this thing, unexploded artillery, ugly looking, it was very thick, blunt, sort of, not very long. And it made a sort of hole in a roadway. And next to it was a beautiful lady's dance shoe. And these two together, it was so incongruous, a thing of beauty and this thing that could have killed someone. And your imagination, how happened, how did she lose that shoe?
Exactly.
Nobody went to dances at that time.
Well, exactly, how did it get there?
However, you notice that, but as I'm saying, it didn't do much to you at the time, but, it stayed in your memory, you sometimes go back.
Exactly, or to an image.
And, its image, yes, its image is still there.
Ani ty, ani ja, nikt z nas dwojga nie umie, nie potrafi pokonać takiej siły jak czas. I jest wielu jak my, spójrz, rozejrzyj się w tłumie, w nich się dzieje to samo, co w nas.
So we got to the warehouse just to be told that all food is finished. And on our way back, we decided to take a different route. And that brought us quite near the Vistula River. And in front of us was one or two soldiers in front of us. And when we came into an open sort of square, the Germans opened a fire. The soldiers went straight forward where they obviously had a business to go. But we knew we had to turn left. It was a straight street at the right angles to the Vistula River. And the Germans were just on the other side of the river. That was them, from there. They were in a view of these animals. These animals were from the zoo, were evacuated to be let loose on the outskirts to fend for themselves. But the Germans just decided to practice, artillery. So we had to turn into that road because we knew that was our way home. Although we never used that road before, and it was a stupid way because we were just next to the Germans. They didn't binoculars to see us. And what did we do, We ran to the houses on our right, there were houses on both sides of the street. And we ran to the houses on the right. And we knew already about artillery, You hear the boom and the whiz. When you hear the whiz, then you clap down, And that's where we looked for doorways. And as none of them exploded, abreast of us where we were hiding, we were all right, And it was cat and mouse game, all the way about 100 yards distance, Boom, whiz, run. And as soon as the explosion, you run.
It's a dangerous game.
That was how you survived. Until we came to the end of the street, and this big square opened up, and our block of flats was on the other side of the square, and no houses on our right. And we were facing the the bow of the square, where there was the main entrance to this block. And we knew that the door was open, and sometimes it wasn't open, sometimes it was locked. But that was, the plan was to make for the door, because we couldn't play again, reaching that flat. There was no doorways all along that block, so the Germans could have picked us up, like ducks, So we said, right, next explosion, everybody for himself and for the main entrance. And of course nobody said, pray God that the door would open. And right enough, the door was open. And no sooner we ran in, the door slammed behind us, and the whoom! If that door was locked,
It's not.
I wouldn't be here telling you the story.
It's not. That's terrible. Because you almost get kind of, I suppose, you went to you almost get blasé in a way, I presume. Not. It's just.
No, we went sort of.
No.
There was a little boy, in that block of house, and he was sort of, we bit cocky at times, but he was too young, too young. We were old enough to realize the dangers. We were long enough in danger and sort of to get hardened, and we got enough experience to know how which was artillery, whether our own artillery or German artillery.
So you almost have, I'm thinking if I'd gone down that street, I wouldn't have survived, but you would have had more of a sense by that time of what to do, even in that situation.
Well, you decided on a thing that was possible in the situation, and just followed. But as I'm saying, if that door was locked,
You'd have had it.
probably, because it had just the steps at the entrance to that door. So a few days, it wasn't long afterwards, when there was a lull in air raids and artillery. And when there was, a lull like this, people started coming from their cellars, and so on, wondering, what's happening, and maybe getting things done. And then the next thing, we heard this aircraft in the sky. It was quite a big aircraft, but very slow. And looking at it, there was quite a few women came out too, and somebody shouted, "That's the English arrived!" You have no idea what the unbelievable happened. The English arrived. However, the next thing we saw, there was a thing fell out of the aircraft. It was this sort of shaped, huge thing, like a big Polish sausage, And it was wee bitty twisted, so when it was falling, it had this sort of, not a straight drop, but it was coming down. It was a
spiraling kind of.
a sort of twist, sort of like a lame person, sort of, And first thought was, they were dropping, supplies. But the next thing, the sausage burst, and there were leaflets coming down. And this was the Germans announcing a surrender of Warsaw.
How awful. How awful.
It wasn't the English.
And what did people feel then when they...
Well, you see how your feelings were being,
chopped and changed.
One minute, you were grabbing, like the, drowning man grabbing at straws, the English arrived, and the next thing, the reality was Warsaw surrendering. And at that very moment, a troop of soldiers were leaving one of the flats. They were using it for rest, and they were leaving for going to the front. And these women went after them. And he says, surrender, Warsaw. Who is surrendering? That's treachery. That's treachery. They were shouting at the poor soldiers. They were not prepared to surrender. They still wanted to fight. And that's why I feel, my feelings for Warsaw were always, there was something special, something, with that commandant with a gun, and doing not only for her own people in there, but people outside.
And certainly in Warsaw, because there was the uprising in Warsaw later on as well. I mean,
that was the one that, that 250,000. Yeah. And then in 1939, it wasn't, the losses weren't that big, but affected everybody. Oh. Yeah. And to finish up, in a way, sort of comic style, Warsaw surrendered. We realized, Warsaw was one of there was no other place to run away to. So there was nothing else but just go home. So we told the commandant, that we're ready to go home. And she said, would you do us a favor before you leave, seeing you've got the push bikes? Could you go to the railway station? Somebody told her that there was a paraffin in the big railway tanks. And she gave us some empty bottles and took our rucksack and so on. And we arrived here. And oh God, this railway station was near the Jewish quarters, It wasn't, the ghetto, what the Germans later on surrounded with wall and kept the Jews separate, But the Jews, they like, you get the Pakistani sort of starting life, one helping the other and so on. And these cisterns were covered with the Jewish people. These ordinary poor, they weren't rich Jews, they were poor people. But they covered this cistern, that you couldn't see. They were like locusts,
I hope you've enjoyed the remarkable story of Henryk Wardzinski and his escape from Nazi-occupied Poland during World War II. There are many more shows on the topic of World War II in our catalogue. You can listen to some of these on our online radio show. There are also many other stories and music shows that you can listen into. You can find us at the Ocean Terminal by Debenhams. There are many objects of interest at the Living Memory Association's Little Shop of Memory. You may find objects that take you back to your youth, or others that may make you think about life in the not so distant past.